The man dropped to one knee in the toy aisle because standing suddenly felt impossible, because something in the girl's eyes had reached past the polished shoes and tailored jacket and wrapped around the part of him he kept locked away. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, boxes of plastic dreams stacked neatly on both sides, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between a powerful adult who owned glass towers and a child whose hands were red from cold. If this were you, if a stranger's quiet hope stopped your breath like that, would you listen, or would you hurry on, pretending you hadn't felt it? The girl was small, maybe 4 or 5, bundled in a pink coat that had seen too many winters. She stood alone, staring up at him with a seriousness that didn't belong to someone her size. Her name, he would later learn, was Hannah, a name whispered by a mother who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't outrun the bills. In that instant, though, all he knew was that she believed in him for reasons he didn't yet understand. Her words, spoken softly in a voice worn thin by disappointment, landed heavier than any boardroom decision had ever made. She said her mom didn't believe wishes worked, but she did, and she needed help, and somehow she had chosen him. His name was Michael Turner, and in most rooms he was the one people leaned toward, the one whose approval could change careers. As the CEO of a logistics company headquartered in Chicago, his life ran on numbers, forecasts, and quarterly calls that never ended. He had built everything from nothing after his wife, Rebecca, died in a highway accident 3 years earlier, leaving him with a grief that felt like a permanent ache behind the ribs. Work became the only place where pain had rules, where effort produced results. In grocery stores and toy aisles, though, grief ambushed him, reminding him of the son he had buried and the promises he never got to keep. Hannah's wish wasn't for a doll or a game, though she stood between shelves of both. She wanted her mom to stop crying at night. She wanted their old apartment back before the pipes froze and the heat went out. She wanted her dad to come home, though she didn't say that part out loud because some wishes hurt too much to name. As she explained, her fingers twisted the zipper of her coat, and Michael felt something inside him fracture. What would you do if a child asked you to fix a world you couldn't even fix for yourself? He stayed there on one knee longer than was comfortable, ignoring the curious glances of shoppers. He thought of Rebecca's laughter echoing in their kitchen, of their son Caleb's small hand slipping from his grasp in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and despair. He had promised himself never to hope again, because hope was a door grief loved to slam shut. But Hannah's belief didn't feel foolish. It felt brave. It felt like the kind of courage adults forgot how to carry. Michael didn't promise miracles. He promised attention, and sometimes that is the most radical kindness. He asked questions gently, learning about Hannah's mother, Sarah, who cleaned offices at night and stocked shelves in the early morning, who smiled for her daughter and cried when she thought no one could hear. He learned about the church down the street that handed out groceries, about the broken heater, about the landlord who stopped answering calls. Each detail etched itself into him, not as a problem to solve, but as a life intersecting his own at a precise, unforgiving moment. Over the weeks that followed, Michael found himself rearranging meetings to check in, sending anonymous payments to keep the lights on, connecting Sarah with a legal aid clinic that could stand up to a negligent landlord. He did these things quietly, almost fearfully, as if kindness might vanish if spoken aloud. He took Hannah to the park once, watching her laugh chase shadows across the grass, and something loosened in his chest. It scared him how much it mattered. Healing often does. Sarah was slow to trust. Life had taught her that help came with strings, that gratitude could become debt. But Michael never asked for anything in return. He listened when she talked about exhaustion that hollowed her bones and guilt that never slept. He admitted his own failures, his nights staring at ceilings, his fear of loving anything that could be taken away. Their conversations were careful at first, then honest, then warm in a way that surprised them both. Change didn't crash in like a wave, it seeped in like sunlight through a cracked door. Winter eased into spring, and the city softened around them. Hannah started school with a new backpack and a confidence that made her stand taller. Sarah found steadier work through a contact Michael knew, not charity but opportunity, something she could claim as her own. And Michael, who had built his empire by never missing a step, learned how to pause. He learned that strength wasn't in control but in presence, in choosing to kneel when standing would have been easier. There were setbacks, a missed paycheck, a night when Michael woke from a dream of Caleb and couldn't breathe, a moment when Sarah nearly walked away, afraid that happiness was a trick. But each time, they faced the cracks together, imperfectly, honestly. Faith, Michael realized, wasn't about believing wishes worked. It was about becoming the kind of person who answered them. On a quiet evening months later, they stood outside a modest townhouse with a small porch and a yard just big enough for a swing. Hannah ran ahead, laughter spilling into the dusk, while Sarah paused, tears blurring the edges of a life she had once thought was over. Michael watched them, heart pounding with a mix of fear and gratitude. If this were you, would you dare to stay, knowing how much it could hurt, knowing how much it already meant? Hannah looked back at him then, her face lit by a porch light and something even brighter. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Michael understood that wishes didn't work on their own. People did. And sometimes when a child believes enough for all of us, the world shifts just enough to let love in. Before this story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments what you would have done in that toy aisle when a small voice asked you to help a wish. If this story reached something tender inside you, if it reminded you of kindness, regret, hope, or second chances, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing so more hearts can find stories like this.